Thank you for coming along to the first of this year's Industry Insight Talks. Hopefully there'll be many more. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Alex and JK, who are, it says here, they're both supply chain business analysts working for the Intel Corporation based in Swindon. They both started their careers at Intel as interns during their university studies. Alex studied ITMB here at UWE and graduated in 2017. JK studied BA Accounting and Finance at Bournemouth University and graduated in 2009. And JK initially worked in finance, moving through to business operations, and now into the supply chain space as a business analyst. The supply chain, you may remember, those of you that were in last week's lecture, is a pivotal element of ensuring that any business can do business with its customers. And the job of supply chain business analysts is to ensure that those systems maximize speed and efficiency while optimizing operations, also ensuring that customers have the best customer experience possible. So doubtless they're going to tell you something about those sorts of things as well as how they do what they do. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. So I'm Alex, JK. So I was in your position a couple of years ago. I was ITMB student at UWE. I graduated 2017. So is everyone here first year at the moment? You just started? Okay, so at this stage, everything's new to you. You know, not sure what's going on, I guess. But when you come into second year, there's opportunity to apply for placements, which is what I did with Intel, which is a really good opportunity you get with this course, and I definitely recommend it. So although you won't be able to apply at this stage, it'd be good, think about where you want to go with your career, and I can answer any questions about that process. So yeah, today we're going to talk to you about what we do as business analysts in the supply chain space, and how that sort of relates to what you study and the type of skills that we would look for as a business analyst, and how you would then apply that into a project. Anything to add?
Right, no.
So here we are. So as I said, I'm Alex, studied ITMB. As an intern, I worked in IT, so it's slightly different to supply chain business analyst, just a different field. So a business analyst can work in a variety of industries. It could be finance, it could be marketing. Essentially, as a business analyst, you're there to understand the needs of the users, so whoever your customers are, but also be able to translate those needs to a technical person. So some technical people are very technical orientated, they're great at what they do, but they don't necessarily understand what people actually want. So that's the role of the business analyst.
Correct. No, good introduction. So, and I started my career at Intel completely differently. I initially started accounting and finance. I did for a very long time think that that's a career path I want to take. I'm quite thankful I ended up at Intel because they're very flexible at assigning you different roles if you don't feel your current role is a good fit for you. So after graduating, I went back, I had an offer following my internship, so I came back to Intel to work in accounting and realized I hate accounting. So I spent 4 years of my life wanting this amazing job. I got there and I realized it's not for me. So thankfully I was at Intel and they're really flexible at moving you around, like I already mentioned. So after spending initial 18 months in finance, I moved on and went into operations. This was a bit more customer-facing role where I got to travel around the world, which is really good. Got to meet clients and understand their concerns, and also that led me to my next role. So all of my customers who I worked with actually used a particular system to place the orders, and because they did that and I was familiar with it, I secured a job in the supply chain solutions as a business analyst following that, and that initial knowledge of knowing what the system does allowed me to secure the further jobs. So I guess this very different journey from Alex. Well, I've been with Intel now for around 10 years. I went through various jobs, and I think that's one big advantage of working for the organization. Not all organizations are flexible to allow you to do that, but Intel certainly is, allowing you to move across and get more experience in the different roles. Okay.
So I did kind of just put this cartoon in the middle. You
I
see
like
in the
it.
middle it says perform magic. So it's essentially what a business analyst does, and we're going to talk to you about what that magic is. But people don't always understand the importance of it. So just a quick intro on Intel. I guess most of you are familiar, and a lot of laptops you'll see our logo, the processor inside is normally an Intel if it's not AMD or something else.
Preferably it's an Intel.
Yeah. So traditionally Intel was just that. It would be client computing, PCs, laptops, which we provide the processing power for that. In the recent years, Intel have diversified and moved into other markets. So you see things like drones, wearables. We've got all sorts of things there, gaming, sports. So Intel are trying to position themselves as a company which connects experiences. So any experience you have of a computing device, Intel wants to be in that space, which feeds into this is kind of where the company sees itself. They call it a virtuous cycle of growth. So a technology that drives experiences. So you've got things like the Internet of Things, which is a concept which has developed over the years where pretty much anything will be connected, from your watch, your toothbrush, your fridge, and cloud and the data center. So the technology that knits that together and drives how everything works. And that, as a cycle, that drives the experience. So, traditionally, that's where the company was, but this provides a lot of opportunities for us in our work. We can work in different industries. You've got autonomous cars coming. It's likely Intel will be involved in that space. So it's not just a, computer processing company. It's much more than that now.
All right. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about generic things of what business analysts do, and probably concentrate a little bit more on the skill side, what we're actually looking in a business analyst when we hire them. I guess the first thing first is, we have business analysts in our organization who are various grades. So they start as junior, right? So they arrive maybe as an intern, and at this point of time, we don't expect them to be excellent at these skills. We expect them to show that they could develop those skills further. So we're not asking that you come and you can do all of these things at once. We're just saying you need to have a starting ability in these areas, and we will help you to develop throughout your placement year to ensure that these are the kind of focus areas of the skills. So the first thing on this communication. The way I describe the business analyst role, we are a translator between what business wants and what technical team could deliver. These two categories, they are not very good at talking to each other. As a business analyst, it's then our role to communicate between various business organizations and various IT teams to make things happen. So, a good example could be we ask to do certain things with business. If you go and give that as a requirement to IT, they sometimes build something completely different from what the business asked. So it's our role to be that intermediate thing and connect the teams and communicate appropriately as to what's required. We communicate every day, all day. I would say we talk to our business stakeholders that are sit together with us in Swindon office. We talk to our business stakeholders that are in various geographies that sit in maybe US or China. A lot of our communication is via the phone. So there's some particular challenges that we're facing, and that's why our job is very vital. We are that translating point, making things happen. The other thing is problem solving. So when the business comes to us with a problem, it's our job to understand how we can resolve that problem for them, right? So sometimes they're not describing the problem how they think they should be happening systematically. They just give us the real challenges they have, and it's our role then to take it, analyze it, and put it to the technical team and say, these are the possible solutions for the problem. Is it technically feasible? Tell us. So we're kind of that intermediate point between two. You can't do problem solving without critical thinking. A lot of our jobs are spent analyzing, talking to various stakeholders, getting various opinions, and then forming the judgment around what actually needs to happen, and what are some of the challenges we're going to face throughout the way. Sometimes that means we know what the full solution should be and we attempt to build it, but we face other problems such as budgets or lack of resource. So we have to use our critical analysis to understand what are some of the crucial things or system enhancements that we need to build in before we can move on and do nice things. So a lot of it is around understanding what our customer is going to value and how the IT team can help us deliver that too. Another big thing is visual modeling. So sometimes we are asked to build a new system or a new tool on the new screen in the existing tool. We do a lot of mock-ups. That means they are not real things, but they are the best that we could, a low fidelity mock-up, that we could create to show them how things potentially look and feel. It's a great way to do things because you haven't developed anything, so you haven't sent your technical team designing something. You actually mocked it up, showed it to your business stakeholders, and basically got their opinion before things started in the development. So we do a lot with analysis and visual modeling. And the last but not least, they're not in any orders, all of these are very important, is facilitation. You as a business analyst, doesn't matter whether you junior grade or you higher grade, you spend a lot of time facilitating discussions. So you might, hear what the technical team think. You might move to talk to your geo reps in various organizations, right? You then might move into a finance stakeholders because they all care about the same thing happening, right? So you become that central part, and as a result, sometimes you're not the expert in the area, but your facilitation skills allow you to actually drive the conversation to the right direction. And that's on a very basic level. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah,
Alex?
so if I was to relate, going back to being a student, your position, look to Kevin to check the modules are still the same, but do things like information practitioner, so that's a lot of modelling tools, and that's sort of the analysis piece. You get a lot of the skills from that, so you understand when you get a problem, how do you use your techniques and tools that you have at your disposal to understand the problem, find the best solution. We also have things like business applications, so you probably don't know what your assignment is, I guess, but if you look to how you get the requirements and how you translate that into a business application, that's kind of another skill that business analysts uses, which you guys learn here, as well as IT. You have the technical understanding. Even if you're not a technical person yourself and doing the actual programming, it's having that understanding of how a technical person would think and how they would understand requirements from their perspective. So I think ITMB as a course has a lot of crossover with what a business analyst would do, and I came from this route, and there's been interns and other people that have come into the organisation or gone to other organisations who've taken a business analyst role from studying ITMB. So you might not realise at the time kind of what you're learning is relevant to the job you might go and do, but you realise that, and I've definitely gained from the things I've learned on the course and applied it into this job. So
I think important message here as well, none of our interns make coffee. They have real jobs from day one. They arrive, they have someone there to help out. Like I was supervising Alex for a little bit whilst he was with our team. You get someone there to help you, to grow your skills, but you actually are given real responsibility. You're part of the project, you sit within the project team and you're given the real responsibility and you're owning stuff from day one. That's one thing we always guarantee. Mm-hmm. Even if it's small requirement and you start small, you're given real thing to deal with, and we never ask you to photocopy anything or make coffee. We might invite you for a coffee break with us, when the time is appropriate, but I think about it as a real opportunity to have your hands on real projects.
Yep.
Okay.
So
we're going to use this project as a case study to explain some of the things we did. This is my main project and Alex's main project. We work on this every day, post this, but we choose this case study because it's kind of easy to relate to. So web order management is our internal tool by which our customers are placing orders, right? They place the orders through this tool. And essentially this provides them that one-stop shop where they go and they can do various ordering activities, whether that's placing order, changing order, whether they update information or run the reports. We use it as a kind of, as a one-stop real-time suite to do that. Now, in terms of magnitude, how big or important this is, well, we are a company that has revenue in they would count them in billions, so we're pretty big. This tool is responsible for around 40% of our ordering. So it's very important. If this tool goes down, that means none of our customers can do any of their activities. If it goes down, it's a crisis. Thankfully, we have a very capable team, and so far we've managed to keep it on track. So what we worked on, so that picture there you might see, it looks like a previous generation, tool. It was old. It was originally based on Adobe Flex system. It was we were receiving the messages saying Adobe Flex, we're going to stop the support for it. That means if you don't do anything, then your customers no longer can log in and do their business, right? Putting 40% of our revenue in jeopardy, right? So we consulted with our team and said, okay, the best next move would be to move it into HTML5 format, which allows us also to make this tool a bit more flexible. So we didn't just take it as we're going to take this tool and rebuild it in a new platform. We also took it as an opportunity to improve it, right? We went and talked to our customers to understand what improvements they need. We did a bit of analysis around how is this used today and what are the most used screens and functionalities, and understood how we can mainstream this tool and how we can make it a bit more user-friendly. What are some of the tools, what are some of the parts of the tool that are not used? If it's not used, maybe we should remove it. Why is it still there, right? So we actually embrace this as an opportunity to make this happen. Yeah? So, rewriting.
So, just in terms of design, it's, like JK explained, we moved from this, which was quite a basic and not a very intuitive or user-friendly platform, into this, which is much more familiar with what they might see today in things like Amazon or that type of platform. We wanted to build something that was familiar to the way customers would operate in terms of managing orders today. So that sort of interacting with the users, understanding their needs and what they would want from a system is how we ended with that. But what we're going to do is just talk through some of the key milestones throughout the project, which we were involved from a business analyst perspective. So this kind of high level. So there's a planning part of this, which planning what we're going to go and do, when we're going to go and do it, sort of resource, time, and budget is the key elements of that. So resource, have you got the people? Time, have you got the time? What's your budget? So it's a balance. Beyond that, you've got development, so the actual development process, how we're involved as a business analyst. User acceptance testing, so once you've developed everything, you need to go and test it and validate what you've actually developed is what's expected by the customer. Deployment and stabilization, so you've tested everything, you're going to push that out to the customers and ensure what you built doesn't break, pretty much. Once you're happy with that, you end the project, and it's kind of where do you go from there. So you don't want to be continuously having to sort of be attentive to that. You'd hope you've got it to a state where this is complete, I can go and work on something else.
That's, I guess, the major thing that makes our work different. We don't work on a daily basis with the same processes. We have a strict beginning of the project, and this is where it ends, and we pass it on to a production support, a team like that. So there's always the end of the project where the resource moves on and does something else.
That's the plan. So I did want to say, is there any questions at this point? I mean, if anyone's got any questions at any time, feel free to put your hand up.
I did want to ask, does the business analyst do the project management as well? Is that
it depends.
It depends on the project. In our specific team, we have 3 BAs, but I also play the project manager role. It's slightly different, so I still do some of the BA work, together with Alex and another BA that we have on team. But it's separate role as such. On some projects where they're smaller, it's just aligned, So whoever is slightly more experienced, maybe, and can help the rest of the team, maybe plays that role. But usually we have a separate role for that. And in terms of progression, it doesn't necessarily that the project manager is a higher grade or anything like that. you could have a very experienced team and they rely on that team, to make things happen. So, and project managers, concern is more that thing in the middle, resource, time and scope, whilst BAs are more concentrated on particular part of the project and they feed into the project manager.
So I've sort of called out some key elements within each phase. So I'm not going to talk to them directly, but allude to them, I guess. So when you're in the planning stage of a project, there's a lot of things to consider. Like we said, we work in a company which operates across different countries, different geographies, in Asia, in the US, and not every customer is the same. Everyone's got a different opinion on how they would like something, and another one's completely different. So there's things you need to do in terms of informed decision making and stakeholder management. So you manage your stakeholders' opinions. You want to keep them happy, but you don't want to fulfill every need they want, because you need to understand if it's the right thing to do. So you need to be mindful of, okay, my stakeholder's asking me for this, but is it the right thing to do? And you balance that, which is kind of this requirements analysis. So you analyse the requirements, work out the best course of action, if there is an action, or you might do nothing, but you communicate out what your rationale is. That's where that modelling tools and that type of thing comes into this. This is also really important, so the technical understanding. You can understand, before you take something to a technical person, you already have that awareness yourself to say, is this even feasible, or is this the best way to do it? So you're not overburdening them. As well as that, you've got to think about the impact of the customer. So if you implement a new piece of functionality, will that impact the experience the customer has today? Will they not be able to do their business anymore? And that plays into the project management, which is the overall planning, like JK said. A BA may play that role, or there may be a project management, but it feeds into the plan of how you sort of approach that. And like we said, this triangle is the key to that. So you're balancing the resource, time and scope.
Yeah, I think from the planning perspective as well, Alex mentioned a very important bit. We have stakeholders across the world. Sometimes we think something is very straightforward and we plan for it, and then we realize for some geos, for example, someone in Japan might completely not understand the design. So, at the planning stage, even though we're not actually physically doing anything, we consider all those opinions and analysis and try to move the project along and decide what's possible within time frame, and whether the right resources are there.
Okay. So development. So this is where you've planned everything out. If we're looking at this project, for example, we took a very, it's called a waterfall approach. So it's a traditional approach to project management, where you define what you do at the start, you develop it, you test it, and you go to the end. There is an alternative approach called Agile, which we'll mention at the end, which is more iterative, and you do smaller increments of the work as you go along to get to the end state. So for this case, we decided what we're going to go and do, and we've planned it. This is the actual development process. So stakeholder management's remained here as a key item. So although you receive the customer input at the start, your stakeholders, you need to keep that going throughout the process and make sure they're aligned with what you're developing, because you could take their requirements away and it could be nothing like they expect. So you keep them in the loop, and that's the validation aspect. So you've got the requirements. Is this exactly what you wanted? Type of thing. Throughout that, it's really important teamwork and collaboration. You're working in a team which you've got the business folks, you've got yourself as business analysts, you've got systems analysts who are similar to a business analyst but a little bit more technically focused, and then you've got your developers as well as the actual end customer. So it's really important that everyone works together and they're aligned. As well as that, so as a business analyst, you'll be involved in testing. So you submit the requirement, you give that to the technical folks to go and work. You need to validate, have they delivered what I want and does it work? Because they could develop something and you put yourself in the shoes of a business user, and something might not go exactly as you expect. So you need to be able to test it, feedback, and we're also very mindful of the user experience. So when we look to implement something, we're always thinking, what's the most beneficial way to do this from a user's perspective? I mean, you could build something that works functionally, but if they don't know how to go and use it, there's no sense to do
Yeah.
it.
From sort of internship perspective as well, I think testing is the easiest part where we see, it's a good fit and start for the intern when they're completely new. Even though they get a new area assigned, we fully trust them to write their own test scenarios. So for that, they need to understand why this is being implemented in the system. So obviously we help them out, but we see, an easier way to start is to get involved in testing where they see, okay, this is what was built, this is what this tool needs to do, and I'm going to go and ensure that everything is meeting the criteria. So starting point usually for someone who is fresh into organization is we give them a test scenarios and we say, go and play with the tool and see what it does. Tell me whether you see any concerns, and then later on, as they develop, they start writing their own test scenarios. They are starting involved in discussions that happen beforehand, and they gradually build the skills to the right level. So, for me, I've seen a few interns go through this process. I think when they see testing, they could relate to it the most, and then from there, they build their understanding and knowledge around what's needed. So.
So user acceptance testing is the next item. So you've developed everything, now you need to actually get the validation from the users, so you get to a point where we're ready to go and deploy this thing. So a couple of things I've called out, change management. So if there's going to be a big change to the way they do business today, you need to do some analysis and make sure they're comfortable with that change, and you take the proper steps to get them there. So that involves a lot of communication, coordination, so you're planning that process, you communicate with the right people so everyone's in alignment. Again, you're analysing the impact to the customer, what will change in the way they do things today. Take you back to this case study example. So the system we had before, a lot of our users, particularly in Asia, they would know how to use the system just by clicking in a certain place on the screen. They won't be able to read what it says in English. They literally have been trained. I click this button, then this one, then this one. So that's something that shocked me initially when we went through this process, and we had to really consider what change it would make to them.
So as a result of that, the change management becomes really hard, because someone who's local comes and says, you're going to change the location of 2 buttons, but it's going to take me 60 hours to retrain every single user to say you now swap them with places, right? So the change management becomes a really difficult job, but then you have to take it in isolation and say, how can I help you to go through this stage so that the rest of the geographies are not impacted, because we have that unique concern about language, right? So, and it's something we're very mindful of. I think for me, the striking things, through user experience, it's been things like a part of user experience as well, where, for example, you need to consider you might be developing for someone who is colorblind. You introduce the color on the screen and you think, oh, I'm going to use this color to ensure that you can differentiate particular items on the screen. If you have a colorblind user, they don't see it, right? And so you need to be mindful about who your user is, who will be using this system. And with user acceptance testing, it could be various things that are challenging, whether it's a language or a disability or something else, that you need to not just only design it for mainstream users, but for everyone else. So user acceptance testing is very important, because it gives you a real feel about how your user might be using the system. And sometimes they go and test it and go, I completely don't understand what you did. How do I complete my task? My task is to get from A to B, but I seem to be going different direction and I can't get from A to B. So that's a real feedback for you to take it back and say their potential for improvement for the future that you need to address.
Yep. So with that feedback, you will get this from this phase. Again, the technical understanding is important, because they could suggest something to you, and before you even take that through to a technical person, you could do the analysis yourself to see, is that even possible? Is it the right thing to do? As well as that, training. So a key part of a business analyst role is you're considered the person that really understands the system from a business perspective. So you might put together some training sessions, some documentation, which aids in that change management to help the customer learn how to use the system. And take them through that journey on a very sort of straightforward way, or as straightforward as you can. So deployment stabilization. So you're actually, this is where you would push the system that you've made the change into the live environment. So, you know, in our example, we had our old WOM system, which our customers were familiar with. We're going to go and, you know, open up the new system to all our customers. So in this phase, again, stakeholder management remains consistent. You know, we're always managing the stakeholders to make sure they're happy and, you know, everyone's aligned with what's going on. That takes some project management in planning when that deployment will be, making sure everyone's ready for the change. I mean, you know, one day you're using the system and tomorrow they change it and you're not aware of that change. You know, have you planned for that? You need to make sure everyone's ready for that change. So that involves managing risk. You need to identify what the risks might be and how you're going to mitigate the risk, or what steps you might take to reduce the risk that might come along. Again, teamwork and collaboration. So you're working as a team with the technical folks as well as your points of contact to the business throughout. User experience, again, consider the user experience, how the user will best interact with the system, what the best way to do things are, and defect management. So you could release a system and you might have issues that arise, you know, called defects. So if something doesn't work correctly, how do you capture that information concisely, and what steps do you take to fix that? You know, is it deemed a high priority? Is it business critical, they can't place an order, or is it just something that's a visual thing that isn't, you know, so important? So you need to be mindful of priority and how you manage those things.
Correct. Yeah.
Anything to add?
And stabilization is always a exciting and hard time, because, you know, you work on something. I mean, this project we worked for probably about 9 months on it, right? On the day when it goes live, there's a big hype. You know, you expect things, you expect feedback. And, you know, you accept that it could be both positive and negative. You know, it could be that people absolutely love what you did, or it could be that you get some negative, you know, input as well. But then you work with those users to understand how you make their life easier, whether it's extra training or anything like that. I think, you know, post-stabilization, again, you know, you complete your tasks, but now and then you even though you transition it to different stakeholders, you know, you still have to go back and rework some of the things, you know, post that. And this is where defect management comes in. Things are never perfect, but I think, you know, we don't strive to get it to absolutely perfection, you know, because of various things that we mentioned at the beginning. That's an important part of it, and this is where you feel, okay, stabilization is done, you're moving on to something else, to a new challenge within the same tool, or maybe completely new challenge within a completely different tool. Depends on what the priorities are for the organization at that given moment of time.
So once you're sort of happy as a project team that the product is stable and you're happy to sort of leave that with the customers and sort of the ongoing support that you would get from production support, which is, you know, essentially, you know, if you've got a problem, you pick up the phone and it's a person who can manage a problem on a small level rather than having the exact expertise. This is the project end. So, you know, you've done so much and you've achieved a lot, but there's a point where it has to end. And the project team, like JK said, will transition away from this project to go and work on something else, or something different within the tool. And this will be what we call production support, so a support function that will continue the work.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty much it, yeah.
That's the project. So it was a challenging project.
Yeah.
We learnt a lot in the process, and you know, I was an intern at the time working on this. I was able to apply a lot that I learnt at university. I got a lot of opportunity to own things and be responsible, working alongside people like JK who's done the job a bit longer than me. But I think it was really good to understand, you know, what I've learnt is relevant and I can apply that into industry and into a real project. It was really good. So we did, like I said, we learnt a lot from this, and there's a couple of things on here that JK can probably vouch that I was guilty of, and I've
Everyone
learnt to
is at some
develop.
point.
So no one's perfect, and it's always good to learn and develop your skills, I guess. So the main one I struggled with was breaking bias. So I don't know, I guess me personally, I thought I knew the correct way something needed to be done, and I was very fixated on, no, we need to do it this way, this is the right way to do it. But until you actually gather all the inputs from your stakeholders and you understand their real problems, you get to that point. It's good to have I guess it's good to have an idea of what you might think and push that as like a conversation point, but it's always, you know, the user comes first. They are your customer and they use the system.
So yeah, I guess the message is, you know, you might think something should be done a certain way, doesn't mean the users you're designing for think exactly the same, right? So it comes with collaboration, you know, owning things, right, and understanding why those stakeholders think different to you, right? Why is your opinion not matching? Well, it leads me to another one. Ask why 5 times, right? We always say it as a business analyst. If someone tells you, you know, if you're validating the requirement and someone says, it's because of this. Let's say you're building a house. Okay, why are you building the house? They might tell you, because I want a house. But you need to ask them 5 times why to arrive to the real reason why they want something, you know, whether it's enhancement to the tool or anything else. It's always asking why. We're all guilty of sometimes not doing it enough, but we have a theory. If you ask why 5 times, you would actually arrive to the right, you know, description of why the user needs it. So those are big ones. But
so we
Agile,
kind
I
of
guess, yeah.
talked about this one, the balance in the stakeholder inputs and opinions. So like we said, you know, you've got stakeholders all over the world, different inputs, opinions. It's taking all of their inputs together and trying to get to the right solution from that. So you want to be able to do the right thing, but also meet what they're looking for in the best way you can.
Well, I think Agile is another big learning, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to chat about that a little bit, how we
Yeah.
go about restructuring it?
So we, like I said, we followed a project methodology, sort of the approach to the project, which was very traditional in what we call waterfall. So you plan at the start, you develop, you test, you release. Pretty much it goes in the steps as a waterfall. So there's another concept called Agile, which is heavily adopted in software development nowadays. There's many reasons for that. So, you know, one of the key sort of criticisms of the traditional waterfall model is change. So a lot of things can change in the course of a project. And if you're building based on something you were told 9 months ago, it's likely that the business might change, their opinions might change, what they actually need, their priority. It's going to be different to what you heard at the start. So what Agile will do is you take the list of requirements and you prioritize what is the most critical at that point for the users, and you work in a smaller cycle of, say, 1 month, and you deliver the top 10 priorities in that time. And then you come to the next month and you do the same thing. So you're incrementally delivering value, and you can validate that as you go along, as opposed to, okay, this is what you want, here it is at the end. So we've actually taken steps in this project to adopt an agile working model recently. At the moment,
we're just starting, so it's actually hard. It's very hard for us to go from doing something that we've been doing for probably 7 years, this project existed, to then saying we're going to align and make the whole of our team do it completely differently. There's challenges coming in that as well, but I think we could break it, and, you know, providing we continue working that way, we can work out, you know, and agree that that's the best way to move forward, even though with the challenges.
Yep. So we're working through it, and there's definitely benefits to it. It's kind of looking at, we saw our customers were getting frustrated with not seeing things early, and this is one way we can address that. We can change the way we work, which benefits everybody. The last two I've got, so I'd say as an intern, I came into the organisation, and I guess, like JK said, people worked in a certain way for many years, and an opportunity for me as a new person to come in with new ideas, and they'll listen, you know. You've got different perspectives, and something that might not have been thought about, you can make that impact and prove that, you know, you can add value. So I'd say a key learning is always try and be innovative with what you're trying to propose, and if you can back that up with I don't know, statistics or real reason to do it, you will be listened to, and you can make a big impact.
Yeah, at Intel we always say there's no stupid questions and there's no stupid suggestions. You know, if you sit in the meeting and they're discussing something, the whole team is discussing something, and you have this idea, you just have to say it. You know, we are that type of organization, I guess. You know, we'll listen to the idea, we'll look at, you know, is it feasible, is it not, you know, how good of an idea it is, and at least we would, you know, think about it, you know, and then we'll say either not feasible to do or too complex to do or whatever that is, but we always try to, you know, to get the opinion heard, you know, and you probably would agree that it doesn't matter whether it's intern or someone senior or someone from a completely different team, you know, providing there's a valid input, you know, we always try to find a way to investigate that and, you know, see whether there's feasibility and value in that.
And then final one, so manage risk and be prepared for change. Like I said, things change a lot. And this comes back to the triangle we showed, so, you know, resource, time and scope. You might have to adjust your scope, so you might have 100 requirements, but your deadline changes to be pulled in, so it's 2 months earlier. You might have to deprioritize things, manage that risk, so you know there's a chance something might change. What do you change? What do you adjust? Someone leaves the organisation, you know, for whatever reason. You need to be ready. If something changes, what do you cut or what do you deprioritize? So it's always being mindful of risks exist and not everything will go perfectly, so be prepared, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's
learnings.
all our learnings. So we will plug the internships as well while we're here. So, like I said, most of you guys are first year right now, but when you come into second year, I'd say my advice would be to start early in terms of looking at internship opportunities and preparing yourself for that. So a lot of companies will do this. Intel's one of them. There's a lot of scope you get from studying ITMB. I mean, you get a business focus, you get a technical focus, you've got a blend of both. You could look to pursue different opportunities. At Intel, specifically, our role there for the last couple of years at least, probably next year, obviously no guarantees, there'll be a supply chain business analyst role available. We're advertising for that this year. So any second years, you can apply for that role, and if you were successful, you would work with myself and JK and the team on types of projects like the one we discussed in the business analyst role. There's also other types of roles available within Intel, you know, sales, marketing, business operations, some more technically focused as well, or even finance roles, all sorts of stuff. Like JK said, Intel aren't looking for someone who's completely perfect and has every bit of experience possible. You know,
we can't do that. We're not hiring experienced person, right? We can't look for that. But we're definitely looking for potential, you know. Do you have a potential to survive working for us for 13 months? And, you know, do you have, you know, the right skills that would secure that job in the future as well? And I think, you know, sometimes we see the situations we'll have interns come in and they know straight away within 3 to 4 months that they really want that job back. And we have other, you know, cases where they come in, they try it, and they say, I don't think this is for me. And this is where we help them to understand what other roles are available at Intel, and the fact that it's not limited to that role, you know, that they could potentially graduate and think about other directions that would be a bit more suitable for them. And I feel very passionate that we're working with interns to help them to make that decision, because I've been in those shoes. Hated accounting, right? Alex mentioned a very vital point. If you want to apply, we start applications very early. So as soon as you're back to your second year and you're thinking about the placement year, you probably should start looking out for opportunities. Most of the companies do it very early as well.
Yeah. So, for example, you know, if you're in a second year now, our position's open right now, so we're taking applications, and earlier the better. I mean, if you're prepared, and one piece of advice I'd say is, you know, learn about the company, learn about the role, and be prepared to just learn and ask questions. That's the best thing to do, is go in with a positive attitude and mindset and look to develop yourself into a career. I mean, I went from being in your shoes. First year I was like, you know, Kevin would say, all of our graduates go on to really good jobs, and I was like, that's amazing, but I don't know how
You
I
do
do
it,
that.
yeah.
So, yeah. So there's a lot of value in ITMV and the opportunities you get. So things like, you know, internships, definitely recommend it. Yeah.
Think about it this way, you know, by the time you graduate, you might be coming out of the university with 1 year's worth of internship in a big organization. It's valued, you know, you might not think that now, but it's really valued and, you know, definitely being considered when you're looking for that perfect graduate job as well.
Mm-hmm. So,
Any questions, I guess?
yeah,
You know,
open up to
be open for
questions.
it.
If anyone's got anything want to ask.
Sure.
It's fascinating that you're switching now to Agile from kind of a waterfall style model.
Yeah.
And I think it would be a fantastic project for someone to go in and do a study and then
Yeah.
follow that process.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
for example, you know, there might be issues around how do you effectively manage an Agile project.
Yep.
If you've got stakeholder involvement,
Mm-hmm.
is there scope creep, that kind of thing.
There's
So,
a lot.
have you any thoughts about that?
Yeah.
Just paraphrase the question for the benefit of
Yeah.
people.
So the question was, how do you manage the complexities with managing stakeholders and
Can we do a
And
study?
can we do a study?
how
I
could
think
we do a
so.
study on the transition from waterfall methodology to an agile methodology, and do things like scope creep come into that? So
Mhm.
to respond to the question, yes, it happens. Ideal agile methodology is once you lock in your requirements for a particular sprint, you wouldn't move from that. So
Doesn't
it's
happen in real life.
yeah,
One sprint, that's fine.
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's two kind of key roles within an agile methodology. If you use Scrum, which is probably the most popular framework within agile, which is essentially made up of the whole development team, but there's two key roles as well as the team, which are the Scrum Master, who is essentially the facilitator of the development team, make sure everyone moves along nicely. They'll try to block any impediments that come along, any issues, they will look to remove that. But the other one is the product owner. So the product owner is, they're not directly within the team, but they sit just on the outside. They're the connection between the business and subject matter experts and the development team, and they will act as the voice of the customer. So they'll prioritise the requirements and say, this is what we definitely need to work on.
I think the other thing to add to your study is the first principle of it is co-located team. Now, if you take an organization like Intel, we are never going to be there. This is one biggest challenge we're always going to face. We can't have co-located team. We're global. We have a development team in India. They used to be in US, so we just went through that shift. And we're probably never going to reach the point where we can justify it. So we have to adjust that methodology to make it work for us as an organization as well. So it's looking how we think should be there in the structure, you know, and how companies adjust to make it work for them.
In terms of the scope creep item, so you know, that's kind of the role, when I was saying about the role of the product owner, so they will lock in requirements for a sprint, and because you're working in a smaller increment, that change of requirements coming from the stakeholders say, oh no, we really need this one to come in, you know, you say, well, we're only working in a 1 month time frame to a sprint, so that can come into the next one, and they don't have to wait so long to get to that point. You know, it might not be exactly how they want it, but you imagine you're working in the waterfall methodology and you've got all these requirements. You're working towards this 9-month deadline, and then you get the scope creep come in. It's much harder to adjust than if you're in a smaller, you know, this is the small amount of work I'm doing. The next month we can prioritise that one to be top of our list, and we'll definitely get that done. So that's the benefit, I guess, you get from working more agile than.
Yeah.
How do we share these learnings?
How do we share these learnings? Hard. I guess you can invite us again to talk to your students again, I guess.
Choosing for students,
Yes.
So,
I guess,
So in the IP
yeah.
module, I don't know what it's like in first year, but definitely in second year and third year, you work on a project and there's an opportunity to. So I applied an agile methodology into my third year IP module. So basically we were given a external organisation, a charity, and my project was to develop a website. So I took my learnings from my placement, and I could say, look, I did this on my placement. This is a really good way to do things. Let's try and do this. But there's loads of material online as well. I mean, you know, you can, you know, feel like it, you can read up about it or watch videos, but there's always going to be, you know, software development style projects. I think business applications is kind of slanted that way. So if you guys wanted to adopt that type of methodology, even on a smaller scale, where you take, I know, what's the top priority for this piece of coursework, and make sure you develop that first, and then you look to build in the not so important things. That's an example of how you've applied the methodology, and you can see that you're trying to take that.
And so how many of you are thinking to apply placement at this point? So quite a few, right? Did you think that was relevant, you know, is it aligned to what you think people do at workplace? You know, is it something that you think would be interested in applying for, or, yeah? Okay. There's a couple nods. That's already good. Yes, I think the most important message is, you know, if that was of any interest, stay connected, make sure, you know, you follow it, you know, and once the deadlines are open, you know, feel free to apply. I think it's already been mentioned, it's a good opportunity, and it's definitely something that would, you know, put you in the right track for the future career. Whether you stay in that career or not, you know, it's a start.
So there's no more questions. Anyone got anything on? It's no stupid question, remember?
Can I ask one question? Well, two
Yeah.
questions actually.
Yeah.
Firstly, to drag you back to something you said much earlier on in the talk, you said that Intel have both business analysts and systems analysts,
Yep.
and they are pretty similar in terms of the roles that they do. What is the distinction?
Okay. Business analyst. Yeah, sure. So the question is, what's the difference for Intel between the business analyst and the systems analyst, and why we have both? In our terms, a business analyst is much closer to the business. Makes sense. We are the ones responsible for collecting that feedback from geos, right, and generating the feedback and analysis. Our systems analysts work very closely with us, but they are more to the technical side. So they do some of the initial development, potentially. They do some code adjustments. They do small technical parts. If you ask me how to do it, I have no idea. You know, they share some things with us and do technical stuff, and I go, oh, okay. So they're much more technical focused. So they are a link into our development world, and we are a link into a business world. And then combined, we work closely with systems analysts. We rarely ever truly have a need to go and talk to developer itself, you know. It's more, they are that linkage and translation into development world. When you go and talk to developer directly, they are too much into technical side, and as a business analyst, personally, I don't really understand them. But the systems analyst has that balance between, I'm talking to business and I know a little bit about technical side. And I think the difference in the number of people we have on the team is purely to do with the size of projects we do. We can't combine it into one role. And in some organizations, it's one role, and then you need to know the technical side. We are not required to do that, even though it's beneficial.
But you can, you know, like JK said, you can move across different roles, and if you were a business analyst and you find, you know, I'm really technically focused and I'm good at this, it might be a potential career path to move that way, or the other way, if you're a systems analyst and you think, you know, I really understand the business and I'd rather be on that side of it, you could shift that way. But generally, we, you know, myself studying ITMB, I have some of that technical sort of understanding, so I can not do their job, but I really understand the way they think and, you know, the way they would want to approach a piece of work or a requirement. So there's definitely a lot of similarities, but it's more of a, are you more business focused or more technically focused?
Yeah.
My second question was in relation to the types of work that you do. So you've broken it down into things like stakeholder management, risk, and the development activities, etc. Does Intel have its own methodology for doing all of these things, or do you rely on and make use of industry standards like print and management of risk and so on?
Yeah, so the question is whether we use industry standard practices for planning and various other cycles of the project, or whether we have our own. Personally, I think we have our own. We don't really follow Prince. We don't really follow standard of the industry, I guess. You know, Agile is probably the closest we're getting to the recognized, I guess, way of doing that. And I think the rest is really quite Intel unique. There are crossovers. You're never going to really do planning without really kind of doing planning, you know, in the standard terms. I guess what we don't reinforce is the industry standards of how it usually is done. So sometimes we have interns that come in and say, I learned about this, where does it fit? And you sort of go, somewhere a little bit here. And it does happen, and you know, we're honest about it, you know. So I think the challenge, if you then move on outside of organization to do a similar role, you have to have additional knowledge in Prince 2 or something else, you know, because that's what other organizations use. I think the reason why we don't do it because of the workforce flexibility. If that wasn't the case, I probably wouldn't be able to simply go from finance into operations into everything else. You know, I might go to HR next time, you know. They don't expect me to have a knowledge or practice. They kind of give you their own version of it, you know. So it's not industry defined.
Yeah, I think it's you'll see very close similarities, but it's like an Intel variation on that. So yeah, not specifically industry standard, but it's close, very close to, and they'll look to that for inspiration and how they can best utilize what industry says to the advantage of Intel. So yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Can I ask you the extent to which you think your placement year helped you in your final year?
A lot.
So this is just to explain the benefits, right, and the extent to which the placement helped the further.
Yeah. So as a placement student at Intel, I came back into university for my final year, and I'd gone from working 9 till 5, or you know, that kind of hours, Monday to Friday, so I had a very organised way of working and good mentality to that. I think university generally is, you know, it's quite independent, but the way you sort of use your time is, I don't know, I might do something in the evening that time, you know, this type of thing. I came back in to university very focused, and I knew what my end goal was. So I was in a fortunate position where on my last day of my placement, I was offered a job back with Intel. So they said, you know, you want to come back when you graduate, you're welcome to. So I was like, great, I really enjoyed my time, love to come back, providing you get a 2-1. So that was my motivation, but I also took my sort of my approach to work and my organisation from the placement year and applied that into my university studies. So I probably sound a bit of a geek, but I finished my dissertation pretty much by Christmas. So I was just chilling for the last couple of months and just tweaking it and not doing too much, and then I could go and do some relevant sort of work experience in another organisation for a couple of months, earn a bit of money. So it worked out well for me. I know not everyone's the same and they won't get in that mentality, but I really think sort of doing a placement got me in the mode of, this is how I work, this is how I get stuff done to deadlines, this is how I plan my time, and I could apply that to university.
So generally what we see in interns as well is same feedback across. You go back to university and they feel where they've been so challenged for that year or 13 months, they quickly find themselves additional things like extra job or something else, because again, they're so disciplined, you know. At uni, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, you know, you might have a lecture at 2 o'clock, you don't get up till like 12 or something because you've been out the night before. That doesn't happen in a workplace. Whether you've been out or whatever, you're there at 9 o'clock, you're participating, you expect to be there and, you know, do your job. So I think that discipline really, you know, a lot of feedback is when interns go back to university, they find themselves in new challenges because they're so used to live that lifestyle for 13 months.
Yep.
So what city? So we're based in Swindon.
Swindon's, do you know Swindon? Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, it's on the M4 corridor going towards London. It's about a 45-minute drive from Bristol. So I live in Bristol still, and I commute to Swindon. Not too far from Reading on the other side, about the same distance from Swindon going the other way. So
I guess it's
Yeah.
worth mentioning as well where Alex, for example, commutes. So I live in Swindon, so I'm in the office most of the days. For some of the people in our office that commute, sometimes they work from home because we're all given laptops with access, right? So sometimes where circumstances are convenient or, for personal reasons or whatever, companies flexible enough to say you can have arrangement where you work from home now and then or do flexible hours, or change working hours as suitable. So I think that's another advantage of being
Yeah.
with Intel as well.
And so in terms of Swindon, so as an intern, just to add, there is an intern community. Like I said, there's lots of different roles. So they'll all be based in Swindon, really. So it's kind of like there's a student feel to it. You're not the only person in that
Yeah.
position. It really depends year on year, but you might have around 40 people in your position of they're an intern with
Yeah.
Intel. They might do a different job role to you, but they can relate to you, and you've got someone, you're the same age as you or the same position as you, so you're not alone. It's loads of stuff going on. The company tries to promote a good work-life balance. You sort of work hard, play hard. As a team, we work really hard day to day, but then, we went on a murder mystery tour a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, they always try to promote that.
Let our
It's a
head
good
down
place
as
to
well
work.
now and then. It's not only just hard work, it's hard work, but it pays off, and we always do go and have fun as well as a team, because that builds a team spirit. Especially if you're working as a team, you have to promote that as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
How big's your team?
How big is our team? So you mean our immediate team? So we're 8 people, are we?
8.
8 people. Sorry, like I
Yeah.
head count. So yes, it's 8 people. Each of us. So even though we're the same team, each of us work as a BA or a PM on different project. So actually, we don't have a common things, even though we're the same team. What we do have is crossover between projects. So this is the reason why we've been placed in the same team, so we can talk about those crossovers where maybe couple of resources suddenly start to work on a similar project, so we can align. But it's a team of 8 people.
But in terms of projects, so like I said, this project we worked on, you've got the 2 of us from
Yeah.
this team, but then you'd have a team of 8 developers in India. You might have 4 systems analysts in the US.
Geo representation, so someone from each geo coming to your calls. So the stakeholders are everywhere. Physically, you don't see them, but they're there. They're there on the calls and participate in the discussions.
Yeah. And you could seek sort of, if there's someone within the organisation that has a certain expertise that you really need, you just go and talk to that person. They might not be within your team, but you could just give them a call and say, hey, you're an expert on this. Can I just get your opinion for my project? And generally, people are cool with that. They'll look to help you as one organisation. So
I think that's an important point as well. We operate something called open door policy, which means that if tomorrow I want to go and schedule a meeting with someone who is quite senior and I'm intern, I can do that, providing you provide the reason I want to meet with you to talk about career aspirations or maybe something that your team does, you're free to do that, So I know there's some organizations who are very hierarchical and then they stop you from doing that. We don't have that. So we have an intern currently, and he's working on a project with some of the finance stakeholders. They're very senior people, and he meets with them on a regular basis to talk about the requirement they submitted. So you're not there, and you're not guarded from the rest of the people in the office. Actually, that's how you find your next opportunity. If you're in finance and you're stuck, this is what you do. You go and network the rest of the team to understand what could be the next role that I feel really passionate about. Maybe I can talk to their manager. Maybe I can understand what people in that particular team do, so that when the opportunity is right, you can apply for the job there. And overall, in Swindon office is around 400 something people, right? So just under 500 people. So when you think about the magnitude of that, even though we're a team of 10, there's a lot of people around you. Any other
Anything
questions?
else?
Come on, we're quite a friendly bunch. Was this helpful? Yeah.
So, if anybody doesn't want to ask now, I'm actually coming back to UWE tomorrow to the careers fair. So, I'll be with Intel tomorrow for that. So, if you want to just come have a chat with me informally, I'll be around. But, like I said, keeping Intel in mind for opportunities in the future. I got a lot from it, and hopefully see some of you guys applying in the future. So thank you very
you.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you.